Boy, that Dickensian name, president of Northwestern University, my alma mater, sorry to say, he is doing a great Drew Barrymore impersonation. I'm talking about from Firestarter, not from her little silly show that she has on now. Compounding the decision he made to terminate Pat Fitzgerald and open up the floodgates to the trial lawyers. The university has now retained one former United States Attorney General for the Obama administration, Loretta Lynch, to do a University Commission investigation that will be made public.
Oh, you mean Tarmac Lady with Bill Clinton?
Yeah, I wonder
in
if
Arizona. Remember that when they were golfing when it was 115 degrees outside? Mm-hmm.
Right, she had Bill Clinton
on her plane
to tell him not to worry, that the investigation to Hillary Clinton, we put guardrails on it, so don't worry about that. So I just don't know. I know she's been retained by the university, but given her Obama administration bona fides, will Ben Crump get the visit to the tarmac, or will Michael Schill? I don't know.
Oh, these are all good questions, but can you imagine if Trump had done that he had met with a AG on a tarmac and claimed that he was in Arizona to golf? Mm-hmm. And they just happened to run into each other.
Yeah, the president's notwithstanding. Now I'm more interested in the attorney general who's in private practice now. Well, that should be really interesting. Meanwhile, among those representing athletes or former student athletes at Northwestern, Ben Crump and Stephen Levin, they are representing, at least according to the latest report I saw, 15 former student athletes, and they are in conversations with at least 50 others. They're representing those student athletes in complaints that have been filed against the university. And Stephen Levin, founder and senior partner, Levin and Perconti, attorneys at law, joins us now. Stephen Levin, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Hi, Dan. Hi, Amy.
So the 15 former student athletes that you're representing, if that's the current number, I don't know. Is that right?
I think it's a larger number than that, but it's probably over 20 at this point.
What sports? What's the expanse of the sports, male and female, they represent in terms of Northwestern?
Our clients are all former student athlete football players.
All football. Okay.
We are talking to some other players, other people, but those are the obviously the far overwhelming majority of our cases.
And can you give us other sports? Oh, okay. Sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, what other sports? Are women's sports, cheerleading? What can you expand on that, please?
Well, there has been reports of there. I don't want to disclose other clients that we are still talking to, but based on news accounts, you see there's volleyball players. There's talks of a mascot. There's talks of people in the baseball program. Mascot. But we are primarily focusing on football.
Willie the Wildcat was car washed. Okay, so with respect to the claims, is there any statute of limitations that is in force here? I mean, aren't IID cases, don't they have 2-year statute of limitations?
Many cases have the general statute of limitation is 2 years. However, that statute is extended under certain circumstances, including repressed memory. Sort of what's going on here is that these players were led to believe or understood that this was a normalized part of participating in the football program. And the consequences of coming forward in that situation would have been extreme and scary to these players. It would have involved probably being ostracized from the football team, ostracized from the program, ostracized from the Northwestern community, which many of them were recruited to join the alumni community, and it was sort of almost like a sick cult that was occurring.
But they were adults.
They started out as teenagers who were
adults
to come to a college.
They were adults when this happened. They were adults when they were on campus. I don't understand.
You mean people over the age of 18 are legally adults?
That's right. Correct. Yeah, right. So they're adults. The way this is being described is like repressed memories of childhood abuse. They're not children. They're adults on campus. They're Division I athletes on a college campus.
Well, I think you're forgetting that these are students who were recruited by Northwestern under the theory that they needed that this would be a home for them. This would be a place for them. This would be a place where they could not only play football but be educated. And they could go on from that position to have the support of the entire alumni network in the community as they, went on with their jobs. I think you're grossly underestimating the pressure a 17 or an 18-year-old kid has when he goes to a football camp. He's trying to do his education. He's trying to play football. He's trying to succeed. And he's placed in an environment that if he doesn't participate, he will be ostracized and will face consequences. That is what hazing is.
Right, but did any of your clients participate in hazing younger, athletes when they were upperclassmen? Because that will come out.
It's our position that the hazed people and the hazers are the same. It's the prisoner mentality. Do you blame the prisoner who does what the guards say to other prisoners because that is the situation that he's in or she's in? It is an environment that if they don't participate, both as hazed and as hazers, they will be ostracized.
So that
is the environment that they were in.
So this is the Stanford prison experiment, is what you're arguing.
Well, I'm not sure what the Stanford prison experiment is, but it's certainly similar. But I think you're looking at the situation incorrectly. It's not the students. I think a better way, a more helpful way to look at it would be to simply say Northwestern had an anti-hazing policy for years and years and years. The coach of Northwestern has made public statements that hazing is zero tolerating. It's sort of infuriating for everyone to put this on the athletes. This would have stopped if someone in the athletic department convened all the coaches, all the administrators, all the trainers, and said, hazing is not allowed. If you've done it, cut it out. If you see it, stop it. If you allow it to go on, you will be expelled or fired. Why is it constantly put on these students? This was organized. They came into the program. It's an administrative issue.
So who organized it?
It's gone on for decades.
So wait a second. Who it's gone on for decades? Well, then, who is perpetrating it? So Gary Barnett handed it off to Randy Walker, who handed it off to Pat. I mean, what does that mean? It's gone on for decades.
Dan,
who organized this?
I don't know if it was. Good question. The investigation will show that, but it is perpetuated for decades.
And so, what was Patrick Fitzgerald's? What do you allege was Patrick Fitzgerald's role?
We are not focusing on individual coaches. We are focusing on Northwestern as a university. This program spanned many coaches, many years, many players. It's a Northwestern University problem. And it simply could have been ended for someone in charge at Northwestern to say, spoken to all the coaches and say, we're not kidding, we're not turning a blind eye. It's not going to be allowed. Stop it.
Well, but do you have evidence that those things never happened, or there's no evidence that you have those things did happen? I mean, it's a university problem, but the university is comprised of individuals, so somebody has to be named as you did or didn't do X, Y, or Z. Does it go back to Arnie Weber when I was there as the university president? Is the university president today? Is he responsible? Who's responsible? No one? Just the university in the abstract? That doesn't make sense.
No, it's the athletic department or the administration that's responsible.
Which
you're
one?
Asking two different questions.
Well, I'm asking who's responsible.
Northwestern University, through the administrators of the university, through its coaching staff, through whoever knew that it was going on or should have known that it was going on and didn't stop it. Well, that's who's responsible.
Well, who knew or should have known?
This, Dan.
Who knew or should have known?
Let me ask you this. The coaches should have known. The people who run the athletic department should have known. The trainers should have known. Everybody should have known who was exposed to it. How could something be so widespread and long-standing where it had its own particular sick rituals and not have been discovered? That's a good question. I mean, I think that's a question better directed to Northwestern.
Well, I mean,
all we know is that it happened. No, it happened.
Well, yeah, it happened at the hands of somebody. So you have 15 players. You're talking to 50 players. They're making specific allegations, but they're not pointing at anybody in specifically. They're just saying this happened, sui generis. We just walk in and people are just doing this, and we have no idea if it's being directed or who knows, who doesn't know. We have no perspective on that.
Well, let me back that question up for a second. You're not denying, I assume, that it happened. You're not denying that it happened over decades. You're not denying that it.
No, I don't know. I have no idea.
Well,
I have allegations.
You heard the reports of the players.
Let me just answer that question, then you can go. Yeah, I use 15 players, 50 players. Well, right. Well, there's going back to one of the guys making an allegation who graduated in 2008. I mean, 15 years. You're talking about thousands of players. So of that group, you have some making allegations, and you have many more either staying silent or saying that's not the Northwestern experience I had. You have people like former quarterback Steve Schnurr standing up for Patrick Fitzgerald, and others doing the same. So it's not like it's completely one-sided here.
Well, I know this. Long before litigation started, the Daily Northwestern broke this story. They interviewed numerous players. Based on that story, the university conducted what they claim was a long, detailed investigation. The result of that investigation, which reviewed documents, interviewed players, concluded that 1, the allegations were true, 2, that they were widespread, and 3, that Northwestern had a substantial opportunity to find out what was going on. That's just the executive summary. We have not seen the entire Northwestern report. We suspect that has even more information on this particular subject. So that is Northwestern University investigating itself before this was litigation, before this was a major news story. And then we have the president of Northwestern who reviewed that report. Admittedly, he's taken some up. He's got to his conclusion in a strange way, but he reviewed that report and said ultimately that after he heard the accounts of the victims of this hazing, he was more morally compelled to fire the coach.
Yeah,
so
but at
don't
first
put
he
it on the
suspended him for
players
2
to
weeks.
try to figure out why they were doing this. That's a question better directed at Northwestern. It was happening. It was affecting people. It was ruining lives. It was barbaric. It was against Northwestern's hazing policy. All of that is clear. To deflect this and to blame the victim, I think, is wrong.
The victim turned victimizer, you said. I mean, because you've team captains.
It's a cult.
Captains for a reason.
You just heard it's a cult. It's a Stanford prison experiment. But nobody was conducting it apparently. What is the definition?
Dan, what do you mean nobody was conducting?
Well,
it was happening. It was happening in the open. There were coaches there.
Oh, so name them. Who's responsible? I'm just asking for names. Nobody wants to name any names. It's very interesting to me. Is Derek Gregg responsible? He's the athletic director. Did Pat Fitzgerald, did he sanction this? What are you saying? Was he oblivious? What is it? I don't hear any characterizations of the alleged responsible parties. I just hear it's the university. What does that mean? You're not going to get money out of a building. You're going to get money out of people.
As the investigations come out, there will be detailed names. I'm not going to name names on the air, but if you've read the complaints, there are at least 2 coaches named in the complaint. My purpose is not to call out individuals at Northwestern that knew or should have known. My purpose is to say this should stop. It should not happen anywhere. It was against Northwestern's policy. It did happen, and people were harmed by it. Do you think, Dan, let me ask you this, Dan, is there any place in a major football program or any football program anywhere in the country for this type of behavior?
Or
hazing?
Hazing.
Or now hazing turning into ritualized sick sexual behavior. Do you think that's appropriate anywhere in any football program anywhere in the country?
So here's the thing. Hazing is now used like bullying. It's sort of this catch-all phrase. So you have to be specific about the behavior or specific about the definition, one of the two, because there's some behavior that's alleged that I recoil at, and if I would have been a football player there, which I wasn't, I wouldn't have participated in, and I wouldn't have allowed to happen myself. Otherwise, I'm happy to throw hands if that's what's required. Number one. Number two, is there any limiting?
Dan, have you read Northwestern's anti-hazing policy?
I have.
Have you read it?
I
do you
have.
Take issue with it?
I do.
Think it's gone too far?
I
do.
do.
You think that stuff should have been allowed? Do you think there's a place for that?
No,
that's the definition that you're looking for.
Counselor, if you ask me a question, you have to let me answer it. You're not a United States senator. If you ask me a question, you have to let me answer it.
Or a news reporter.
Or a news reporter, exactly. And I'm not a news reporter. I'm a radio talk show host, and I am letting you answer.
Or a radio talk show host.
And I am letting you answer questions. That's the difference, I suppose.
Go ahead, Dan.
So here's the thing. I do have problems with the anti-hazing policy as written because I think it's too broad, and this is exactly my point. What is the limiting principle to quote-unquote hazing? Because from the trial lawyer's perspective, of course, it's going to be whatever my client who claims to be a victim says is hazing.
Wrong, Dan.
It could be It could be a crossword.
Dan.
Go ahead, answer.
It's not the trial lawyer's perspective. No trial lawyers wrote Northwestern's anti-hazing policy.
Right.
No trial lawyer has studied hazing and its negative effects. Hazing is not something that's allowed.
Is there any limiting principle?
Detailed description. Let me ask you this. You said there's some type of hazing that you think is appropriate. What type of hazing is that?
That's not what I said. I said, is there a limiting principle? This is a term that's being used generically, and I think it has to be addressed specifically. The specific behavior, the specific conduct that's alleged, because
it's alleged in detail of it in our complaint.
I keep asking, and you keep avoiding. Is there any limiting principle in a Division I men's football program? Is there any limiting principle to somebody making a hazing allegation?
I guess I'm confused by what you mean by limiting principle.
If I say it's hazing, it's hazing. Is there anything that limits my viewpoint on what is or is not hazing as somebody making an allegation?
Well, I guess the best way I can answer your question is read you Northwestern's anti-hazing policy.
I did.
It's any physical abuse expected or inflicted upon another, including paddling, tattooing, branding, creation of excessive fatigue, sleep deprivation or interference, physical and psychological shock, sexual violations, prolonged exposure to severe or inclement weather, periods of silence, kidnapping, road trips, abandonment. Dan, how should I say this in a nice way? It's hard for me to believe that you don't understand what hazing is and all the implications.
Okay, learn it.
So you're either on the side of hazing or you're not. And if you agree that hazing should not be permitted, that it has no place in a program. And Pat Fitzgerald, have you read his statement on it? Do you know what he said 10 years ago?
Yeah, he said hazing had no place. That's right.
No place.
I understand.
In a football program.
I understand.
So
I understand what he said.
If you take issue with that you're right.
Yeah.
But that's what he said. That's what Northwestern said. That's what any reasonable educator in this country said.
I understand what they say. And then there's the reality of how 18 to 22-year-old men on a football team who are trained to be killers interact. But my larger point, and you just made it for me, is that
trained to be killers?
You know what I'm saying.
You're going a little too far.
You know what I'm saying on the football field. You know what I'm saying.
I don't know what you're saying.
Yeah, well, let me tell you what I'm saying. That if you're going to pretend to be obtuse like the typical trial lawyer, then I'll tell you what I'm saying. They're trained to be physical and aggressive and fighters and break. I mean, obviously, you know what football is, particularly at that level. So, you want to talk about being silly, and you just confirm what essentially was my point. That is the Potter-Stewart standard for pornography. I know it when I see it, and so there is no limiting principle. And I agree, based on the independent report, probably what will come from Loretta Lynch, and certainly previous statements that Northwestern is going to open up its checkbooks, and they can't wait to do it, because the good news for you, Stephen Levin, is that Northwestern has a lot of money and very little character. So you're in a good position. Stephen Levin is the founder and senior partner at Levin Perconti Attorneys at Law. Stephen Levin, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's what Chicago is talking about. It's Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy on AM 560. The Answer.
You've decided to remodel your kitchen